my brother destroyed my car, refused to pay me back, and my mom still told me to give him space. That's when I realized what role I actually played in my family. I want to start with a number. $4,680. That's what my brother cost me. Not borrowed. Not, I'll pay you back eventually. Not a loan with a handshake and good intentions. Just gone. Because of him. Because of a decision he made without asking me, without warning me, without even a text. And when it happened, my family asked me to forgive him. So let me tell you what happened. And then let me tell you what I decided. My name is Nathan. I'm 31. I work in IT project management, which means I spend my days solving other people's problems and trying to keep things from falling apart. I'm good at it. I've always been the person in my family who figures things out. The one people call when they don't know what to do. That used to feel like a compliment. It took me a while to understand it was also a trap. My brother is Derek. He's 27. And I love him. I want to be clear about that up front because this story could make it sound like I don't, and that's not true. Derek is funny and creative, and when things are good with him, he's one of my favorite people. But Derek has always had what my mother charitably calls a problem with thinking things through. What she means is that Derek acts first. Always. Without checking. Without asking. Without considering what happens to the people around him when the thing he's just done starts to unravel. I'd been absorbing the consequences of that for years. I just hadn't put a dollar amount on it before. Here's what happened. I own a car. A used sedan I'd bought 3 years ago and kept in good condition. Nothing fancy. Practical. Reliable. Paid off. It was mine. Last November, Derek called me asking if he could borrow it for a weekend. He needed to drive upstate for a job interview. His car had been in the shop for 2 weeks and the rental place wanted a credit card deposit he said he didn't have accessible at the time. I said yes. Because he's my brother. Because the interview mattered. Because that's what you do. I gave him the keys on a Friday morning. He drove away. I didn't hear from him until Sunday evening. And look, I think most people would have done the same thing. Your brother needs the car. You give him the car. That's not naive, that's just family. But I want you to notice what I said. I didn't hear from him until Sunday evening. Not a single update the whole weekend. In retrospect, that was information. Sunday evening he called. He said, "So, there was an incident." That word. Incident. He'd been driving back from upstate and had taken a detour he hadn't mentioned, to visit a friend who lived about 2 hours off his route. On that detour, on a back road, he'd clipped a guardrail. He said he panicked and kept driving. Got home. Checked the car. The damage was significant. The entire right side panel. The door. Part of the rear quarter panel. The mirror. Completely gone. He said, "I'm really sorry. I know this is bad." I stood in my kitchen and looked at the wall for a long moment. "Are you okay?" I asked first. Because that matters. He was fine. Not a scratch on him. I told him I'd look at the car in the morning. The estimate came in at $4,680. I stared at that number for a long time. My insurance would cover it. Technically. But it would mean filing a claim, which would mean my premium going up, which would mean paying for this for years. And my deductible alone was $1,500. So I had options, and none of them were good. I called Derek. He already knew about the estimate. I'd texted him the number. He said, "That's way more than I expected." I said, "Derek, how much of this can you cover?" Silence. Long silence. Then, "I mean right now?" "Not much. I'm in between things." "In between things," I repeated. I didn't expect it to be that much. Can't insurance just handle it? Can't insurance just handle it? I think about that sentence a lot. Because what it reveals is the assumption underneath everything. That there would always be something. Insurance, me, our parents, someone, to absorb whatever Derek left in his wake. The idea that he should absorb it himself didn't really compute. I didn't yell. That's important for me to say because I think people expect yelling in a story like this. There was no yelling. I just said very clearly that I needed him to contribute to the repair, whatever he could manage, and that we'd figure out a payment plan if needed. He said he'd think about it. He sent me $200 3 weeks later with a voice message saying he'd get me more soon. He didn't get me more soon. Months passed. I repaired the car, paid the deductible, ate the premium increase, handled it myself because it was my car and I needed it drivable. I texted Derek a few times. Got responses that were vague and then less frequent and then stopped entirely. By March, he owed me, conservatively, counting the premium impact, somewhere close to $4,000. And he had stopped responding to my texts about it. That's when my mom got involved. She called me one afternoon, her voice in that careful neutral register she uses when she's about to say something she knows I won't like. She said, "I've been talking to Derek. He's going through a hard time right now. He feels terrible about the car situation. I was hoping you could give him some space on this." I said, "Give him space. He's struggling, Nathan. He doesn't have the money right now." "Mom," I said, "he borrowed my car without telling me he was going somewhere 2 hours off route. He damaged it significantly. He's contributed $200 out of nearly $5,000 owed. And now you're asking me to give him space." She was quiet. Then she said, "He's your brother." And there it was. He's your brother. The sentence that had been used to justify almost everything Derek had ever done. I don't want to be harsh about this because I know my mom means well. I genuinely do. But I've noticed that "he's your brother" only ever flows one direction in my family. It's something I'm expected to absorb. Never something he's expected to live up to. I told my mom I loved her and I got off the phone. And then I sat with something I'd been sitting with for a while. A question I kept approaching and then backing away from because the answer made me uncomfortable. The question was, what is the actual cost of being the reliable one? Not just this time. Over the years. I started thinking back. Not obsessively. Not to catalog grievances. Just honestly. The time Derek borrowed money for a temporary cash flow problem that turned into a permanent gift. The time he no-showed to help me move apartments because something came up, and I said no worries. The times I'd driven him places, covered for him, problem-solved situations he'd created and then walked away from. The times I'd made myself smaller or more flexible because Derek needed room. I had been the buffer. 4 years. And I'd never called it that. I'd called it being a good brother. I'd called it family. But there's a point where absorbing someone else's consequences indefinitely isn't generosity. It's just a pattern. And patterns don't change unless something changes them. I made a decision. Not a dramatic one. No announcement. No speech. No ultimatum delivered at a family dinner. I just quietly stopped. I stopped offering to help when family problems came up. Not coldly. I didn't become someone else. I was still present. Still warm, still showed up for important things. But the automatic yes that I'd been giving for years to requests that cost me time and money and energy? That stopped. The first test came about 6 weeks later. My dad's car needed a repair. Nothing major, but he wasn't sure who to call or how to negotiate with the shop. Normally he would have called me, I would have handled it. Problem solved. He called me. I said, "Dad, I can send you the name of a good shop. But I've got a lot on my plate right now. I think you can handle the call." Silence. "Oh," he said. "Okay." That was it. He handled it. It was fine. And here's the thing that surprised me about that moment. He wasn't upset. He just did it. Because he could. He'd always been able to. I had just always jumped in before he needed to try. That realization sat with me for a few days. The second test was bigger. Derek called me in April. New crisis. Different situation, same shape. He'd gotten into a dispute with a landlord over a security deposit, didn't have documentation, didn't know his rights, needed someone to help him figure out what to do. Old Nathan would have spent an evening researching tenant law and walking him through every step. I said, "There are tenant rights organizations in most cities that give free advice. I'd start there." He said, "Can't you just look into it? You're way better at this stuff than me." "You can figure it out," I said. "I believe that." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you still mad about the car?" I thought about how to answer that honestly. "I'm not mad," I said. But something shifted for me after the car situation. I realized I'd been taking on a lot of things that weren't mine to take on. I'm trying to do less of that. So you're punishing me. Derek, I'm not punishing you. I'm just not solving your problems for you anymore. Those are different things. He didn't respond to that. He hung up a few minutes later. My mom called 2 days after that conversation. She'd spoken to Derek. He told her I was being cold and holding a grudge. She wanted to understand what was happening. I told her, calmly, clearly, without drama. The car, the money, the pattern I'd identified, the decision I'd made. She listened, really listened, which I appreciated. When I finished, she said, I hear you. I think some of what you're saying is fair. A pause. But I also don't want this to create a bigger distance in the family. Mom, I said, the distance is already there. I'm just finally seeing it clearly. She didn't have an answer to that. We talked for a while longer. I told her I loved her, and that I wasn't going anywhere, and that I would still show up for things that mattered. But I also told her that being relied upon and being taken advantage of had started to look the same from the outside, and I was no longer willing to blur that line. She said she needed to think about it. That felt honest. I respected it. My mom is a good person navigating a complicated situation. I don't think she ever consciously decided to run this dynamic. I think it just grew the way things do in families, gradually then suddenly. And rearranging it is uncomfortable for everyone, including her. That's okay. Discomfort isn't damage. It's been about 4 months since I made this shift. Derek and I haven't talked much. A few texts, surface level. The money is still largely outstanding. I've accepted I'm probably not getting most of it back, which is its own kind of conclusion to reach about a person. My family hasn't fallen apart. That was my quiet fear, I think, that if I stopped being the glue, everything would just come undone. It hasn't. People adapted. Problems got solved without me. The world continued. What changed is smaller and more personal. I feel less tired. That's the most honest way I can put it. I feel less tired than I've felt in years. Like I'd been carrying a weight so long I'd stopped noticing it, and now it's down and I can feel the difference in my shoulders. I want to say something to anyone watching this who recognizes themselves in this story. Not in my position, but in Derek's. Not as an attack. Genuinely. There is a version of being loved by your family that can quietly teach you that your problems will always be someone else's to solve. That responsibility has an escape hatch. That the reliable person will always catch you. And if you've been living inside that version long enough, you can stop even noticing it's happening. That's not a character flaw. It's a pattern. And patterns can change. But they don't change until the person who's been absorbing the consequences stops absorbing them. So if someone in your life has recently stopped catching you, consider the possibility that they're not being cruel. Consider the possibility that they're finally being honest. $4,680. That's what it cost me to finally understand something I should have understood years earlier. About what I was worth to my family. About the difference between being loved and being useful. About what I owed them, and what I didn't. I'd call that expensive. But I'd also call it worth it.